I'm staring at an empty driveway, just fresh oil stains where my sunset orange 1967 Camaro used to sit, and I swear to God my brain couldn't process it at first, like I'd blink and it would pop back into existence like it was some cruel magic trick. 2 years. 2 years of blood sweat, busted knuckles, and 500 a.m. garage nights, restoring the absolute dream car of my late wife Maria, and it was gone. Towed. Not stolen by some random thief in the night. No, no. This was authorized. This was the HOA. And standing at the edge of my driveway like she owned the ground under my feet was Delilah Grimby, our HOA president, smirking so hard it looked like her face might crack, waving a violation notice like a trophy. "Choose better colors next time, Mr. Rodriguez," she said, sweet as syrup, eyes cold as a freezer. Big mistake. Because she had no idea I spent 20 years as an Army tank mechanic, and my buddy Pete just happened to keep a fully operational World War II Sherman tank sitting in his barn. 2 weeks later, that beast rolled down our quiet suburban street, and Delilah completely lost her mind, like full-on neighbors, grabbing their phones, kids, gasping grown men, laughing kind of meltdown. But trust me, that wasn't even the wildest part. Not even close. Now, before you decide I'm some unhinged guy who thinks tank is a normal solution to anything, let me back up. I'm Marcus Rodriguez, single dad auto shop owner, and yeah, former Army. After I got out, I came home to fix civilian rides instead of Abrams tanks, but the habits never really leave you. Read the fine print. Document everything. Never underestimate someone who smiles while they're twisting the knife. My daughter Sophia and I are one of exactly 3 Latino families in a cookie-cutter suburb called Maple Creek Estates, 200 houses that all look like they were stamped out of the same plastic mold. The smell of fresh-cut grass and conformity hangs thick in the air out here like it's part of the landscaping package. 3 years ago, Maria died of cancer. And I don't mean the movie version where everyone says the perfect goodbye and the music swells. I mean the real version, chemo exhaustion, a brave smile that got smaller every week, and a hospital room that felt too bright and too quiet at the same time. Sunset orange was her favorite color. She used to say it reminded her of hope, burning bright even in the darkness. And on one of those nights when she knew, when we both knew, she reached for my hand and said, "Marcus, restore that old Camaro in the garage. Paint it sunset orange. Every sunrise will remind you I'm still here." So I did. I made it my mission. Every morning at 5:00 a.m. before the world woke up, my garage filled with the smell of coffee brewing and motor oil warming primer fumes mixing with memories. The rhythmic scrape of sandpaper on metal became my meditation. Sophia would join me on weekends, her small hands learning how to work rust spots, how to lay down a base coat without runs, how to step back and admire progress. "Dad," she'd say, grinning through a smudge of grease Mom would totally flip, seeing this beauty come together. 2 years. Every spare dollar, every spare minute. And when it was finally done, when that sunset orange paint caught the morning light like a flame, I felt something I hadn't felt since the funeral. Pride. Peace. Like I'd kept my promise. Then Delilah Grimby moved in and declared war. She showed up at her first HOA meeting in heels that clicked like a countdown, blonde hair, perfectly curled lipstick, sharp enough to cut glass, and that plastic smile, the kind that tells you she's already decided what you are. She got herself elected HOA president in 6 months by promising standards and property values. Translation: keep people like me in line. At first it was subtle. Friendly suggestions, she called them. Comments about appropriate vehicle choices, little speeches about how certain colors might negatively impact resale values. Meanwhile, Tommy Richardson's bright blue Ford truck sat in his driveway for 3 years and never got so much as a warning. The Hendersons had purple shutters on Elm Street, purple like cartoon grape, no problem. Mrs. Watson had lime green garden gnomes that looked like a carnival threw up in her yard, and somehow those were charming community character. But my Camaro Maria's memorial suddenly violated community standards. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know the game. They don't say I don't like you. They say, Section 4, subparagraph B maybe. They hide behind paper and call it fairness. Other neighbors started whispering their own stories. Pete Williams, 74-year-old Korean War vet, got complaints about his woodworking being too noisy at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Jennifer Martinez, single mom next door, got cited because her kids drew sidewalk chalk art, and apparently that was inappropriate community use. The pattern wasn't subtle once you saw it. Always the minorities. Always the families barely scraping by. Delilah had a radar for vulnerability. And I'm not some pushover mechanic who folds because a woman with a clipboard says so. Military service teaches you one thing. Fast, always read the fine print before you sign anything. So I drove to the county clerk's office and pulled the original HOA covenant documents, 1987 yellowing paper, dusty ink, the real rules filed in public record. The vehicle color restrictions. Basically earth tones or traditional colors. That's it. Vague as a politician's promise. Nothing about approved palette. Nothing about sunset orange is illegal. Then Delilah hand-delivered my violation notice herself, clicking across my driveway like a spider sensing prey. Mr. Rodriguez, your vehicle doesn't comply with current community standards. 30 days to remedy the situation. I asked what standards. I showed her the original covenant language. She just smiled wider. Well, the current updated guidelines are quite clear about appropriate color choices for our neighborhood. Updated guidelines. Since when? That night I filed a formal records request for every HOA document modification since 1987. Homeowners have that right. They can't refuse without court intervention. And what I discovered made my hands shake with rage. Someone had been systematically rewriting our covenants. New paint restrictions. Vehicle type limitations. Landscaping requirements. All mysteriously added in 2022. Same black ink, same looping handwriting. 0 board votes. 0 homeowner notifications. And every update carried Delilah Grimby's signature like she was queen of Maple Creek Estates. I remember staring at those pages under my kitchen light, hearing Sophia in the other room doing homework, and feeling something hot crawl up my spine. This wasn't about standards. This was about control. This was about putting the wrong kind of people back in their place. And then she did the thing that broke me. 2 weeks later, I'm working Saturday overtime at the shop helping a regular customer when I come home and my driveway is empty. Just those fresh oil stains, where Maria's dream car should be. I didn't even move at first. I just stood there like the air had been knocked out of me. Sophia came outside, saw my face, and her eyes went straight to the stains. "Dad, where's Mom's car?" The sound of her voice confused, scared hit harder than any punch I took in the Army. Delilah had it towed. $800 in towing and impound fees to get my wife's memorial back. And my 17-year-old daughter, my kid, who should have been worried about prom and college essays, looked me dead in the eye and said, "I can quit my college prep classes. I can work more. We'll pay it." That's when the anger turned into something else, something cold, because it wasn't just harassment anymore. It was harm, real harm. And I'll tell you the part I don't say out loud often that night, after I got the car back, after I paid the money, swallowed the humiliation, and watched Sophia try not to cry. I sat alone in the garage with the Camaro's hood up, staring at that sunset orange paint, and I thought, maybe I should just give up. Maybe Delilah was right. Maybe fighting the HOA is like fighting fog. You swing and all you do is get tired. I even had this awful moment where I wondered if I'd brought this on us, if painting the car that color was selfish, if I was clinging to grief in a way that made life harder for Sophia. I remember resting my forehead on the fender and whispering, "Maria." I'm trying like she could answer. And then I looked at the passenger seat and saw a small smudge of orange paint on the fabric, Sophia's fingerprint from the day she helped me finish the last coat, and something snapped back into place. No, I wasn't wrong for honoring my wife. I wasn't wrong for existing in my own neighborhood. And Delilah wasn't powerful. She was just loud. So the next morning, the military part of my brain kicked in like an old engine turning over. Intelligence phase, evidence collection, strategic planning. Because when someone declares war on your family, you don't just complain. You build a case so solid it crushes them. Delilah escalated, of course. She called city code enforcement, claiming I was running an unauthorized commercial auto repair business out of my residential garage because I'd helped neighbors fix their cars for free. Code enforcement showed up, walked through, found nothing, and left annoyed. Delilah lurked across the street like a buzzard waiting for roadkill. And while the officer was still writing his report, my phone buzzed a neighborhood app post with photos of cars in my driveway and a caption about an illegal auto shop ruining property values. Anonymous account. Brand new. Subtle as a brick through glass. So I went back to the county clerk. I requested every HOA violation notice issued in our neighborhood for the past 2 years. Patterns reveal weakness. And the pattern made my blood boil. Almost all the citations went to the 3 minority families. Meanwhile, the loud, obvious stuff from other people got ignored or hand-waved as character. I compared the original covenants line by line with the current version and found 17 new restrictions added in a tiny window in early 2022, all in the same handwriting with no official process. Bright colors, work trucks, vegetable gardens, native plants. Things minority families actually had. It wasn't even subtle discrimination, it was targeted engineering. Around this time, Delilah called an emergency HOA meeting about my disruptive behavior. 23 neighbors showed up, biggest turnout in years. The room smelled like stale coffee and tension. Delilah stood at the podium with a PowerPoint titled "Maintaining Community Standards," like she was giving a TED Talk on being insufferable. Slide 3 was a photo of my Camaro with a big red X across it. And then Pete Williams, 74 years old, spine like steel, stood up and said, calm as a rifle shot, "Delilah, I've been here since this neighborhood was built. My truck was fire engine red for 15 years. You never complained until Rodriguez moved in." The temperature in that room dropped. Jennifer spoke next. "My kids got cited for sidewalk chalk. Since when is children's creativity a violation?" Mrs. Fiona, quiet lady who usually avoids drama, said from the back, "You said my rose garden was too colorful." "They're roses, Delilah. They're supposed to be colorful." One by one, people who'd been swallowing it finally spoke, and the meeting turned into a public confession of everything Delilah had been doing. I waited until the room was fully awake, until even the folks who'd voted for her were shifting uncomfortably. And then I stood up with a folder in my hand. "Actually, Delilah," I said, "let's talk about standards." I pulled out the original 1987 covenants. These are the real rules, the ones filed with the county, the ones that don't include your additions. You could have heard a pin drop. Delilah's face went pale like fresh primer. She started stammering about updated guidelines and board authority, and I cut through it. You don't get to rewrite community law with a pen in your living room, and you definitely don't get to use it to target protected classes. She tried to gather her papers like she could pack up the moment and carry it away, but she was already drowning. Then she made her next big mistake. 3 days later, every homeowner got a certified letter announcing a $5,000 emergency special assessment to fund a legal defense for the HOA against frivolous lawsuits. $5,000 from every family, to pay lawyers to defend her. The audacity was almost impressive. But she forgot something: homeowners have rights regarding HOA finances. So I demanded financial records. Every bank statement, invoice, receipt, every transfer for 3 years. And while I waited, I looked up the management company collecting our administrative fees. Grimby Management Solutions. Cute name, right? Turns out it was owned by Derek Grimby, Delilah's husband, and it was incorporated 2 months after Delilah became HOA president. What a coincidence. When the documents arrived, I spread them across my workbench in the garage, right where Maria and I used to plan the Camaro restoration. Only this time I wasn't rebuilding a car, I was dismantling a scam. The HOA had paid that company an absurd amount for services that didn't exist. Landscape consultations for common areas we don't have. Legal reviews for documents she forged herself. Emergency tree removal while every tree was still standing. And the bank statements showed transfers from HOA accounts to the management company, then straight into the Grimby's personal account like they weren't even trying to hide it. Meanwhile, the harassment got uglier. Anonymous posts painting me like a dangerous veteran, messages targeting Sophia, nasty racist little jabs that weren't even clever, just cruel. That's when I realized Delilah wasn't just abusing HOA power, she was slipping into criminal territory because she was panicking. And panic makes people sloppy. I took screenshots, saved letters, kept records, and I filed complaints with the right authorities, the ones who don't smile at HOA presidents and call it a civil matter. Delilah tried a nuclear option next. I got a certified letter saying the HOA had voted to terminate my residency and force me out. Constructive eviction threats. Except HOAs can't evict homeowners. Ever. It was fake, pure intimidation. But it handed me the perfect excuse to do something I'd been considering for weeks, something symbolic, legal, and loud enough that Delilah couldn't keep controlling the narrative. That evening I called Pete Williams. "Pete, I said that military equipment you mentioned. Tell me everything." He chuckled like gravel in mischief. "Well, Marcus, I own a fully restored 1944 Sherman, street legal with the proper permits. I've driven her in parades from Austin to Houston. My brain started planning like it used to before an operation, overwhelming force, psychological pressure, legal protection. What would it take, I asked, to bring it to our neighborhood?" Pete's laugh turned almost delighted. "Son, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? I'm thinking Delilah needs a history lesson." I said, "I did my homework the right way. Permits coordination, safety, all of it, because the point wasn't to threaten anyone. The point was to demonstrate something Delilah had spent 2 years pretending she had real authority, real process, real law. And then here comes the twist. I didn't expect the federal government called me. 3 days before the scheduled demonstration, my phone rang. "Mr. Rodriguez," a woman said, "this is Agent Sarah Martinez, Civil Rights Division." My heart started hammering like a diesel engine. She told me they'd completed a preliminary investigation into my complaint, forged covenant modifications, fabricated enforcement procedures, discriminatory targeting of protected classes. "Mrs. Grimby is facing multiple felony charges," she said, like she was reading my favorite bedtime story. And then she dropped the real bomb. My neighborhood fight had uncovered something bigger. Multiple HOAs, identical fraud schemes, a network of corruption across counties. Federal coordination, IRS, state investigators, RICO charges on the table, 20 years in federal prison kind of charges. And then she said, "We understand you have a historical vehicle demonstration planned. We'd like federal observers present to document community response and ensure Mrs. Grimby doesn't interfere with your constitutional rights." I actually laughed because how do you not laugh at the sentence, "The FBI wants front row seats to your tank demonstration"? Word got out fast anyway because Delilah couldn't stop talking, couldn't stop posting, couldn't stop spiraling. By Wednesday evening, our quiet street looked like the media was preparing to cover a landing on the moon. News vans, reporters, neighbors, whispering like it was a blockbuster premiere. Delilah's house turned into a paranoid bunker, cameras everywhere, lights popping on at squirrels, security guards patrolling like they were guarding Fort Knox. You could feel the neighborhood shifting. People who'd been afraid to speak were suddenly standing taller because bullies hate daylight, and Delilah was about to get blasted by spotlights. Thursday evening came crisp air tension so thick you could chew it. Families gathered near the community center. People held up phones. Kids climbed onto curbs for a better view. And then the lowboy trailer turned the corner, and there it was, olive drab steel, huge tracks, that unmistakable silhouette. The Sherman rolled in like history itself had decided to make a point. The crowd made this sound, half cheer, half gasp, that went straight up my spine. And in the middle of all that, Delilah finally snapped. She burst out of her house like a banshee in a bathrobe, screaming, "You can't bring that thing here! This is terrorism! Call the Army! Call the National Guard!" Her voice was cracking frantic, like she could shout reality into changing. I stepped forward with the paperwork in my hand, calm on purpose, because nothing drives a Karen crazier than not getting the reaction she wants. "Ma'am," I said, "this is a legal historical vehicle demonstration. All permits are filed. Law enforcement is notified. Federal observers are present." She looked like she might implode. "Legal," she shrieked, eyes bulging. "You're invading our neighborhood with military weapons." And that's when Agent Martinez stepped into view, badge out, voice firm and flat in the way that makes liars swallow hard. "Mrs. Grimby," she said, "Mr. Rodriguez's demonstration is constitutionally protected, political speech regarding housing discrimination. Any interference constitutes a federal civil rights violation." Delilah's mouth opened, and something ugly came spilling out. Rage, entitlement, the kind of standards she'd been hiding behind. She started ranting about who belongs and who doesn't, about property values, about rules, and the worst part was, she didn't realize she was saying the quiet part out loud on camera, in front of neighbors, in front of federal agents. Phones were recording from every angle. Reporters leaned in like sharks smelling blood. Even her own hired security looked like they wanted to vanish into the pavement. She made one last desperate move, charging toward the tank like she could physically stop it flailing and screaming, and that was it. The moment froze like the universe finally said, "Okay, enough." Agent Martinez nodded to another agent. "Mrs. Grimby," she said, "you are being detained pending further investigation." Delilah's face changed shock to fury, to pure panic, like someone unplugged her power source. Across the street, Derek Grimby tried to slip into their car with suitcases like they were going on a spontaneous vacation, but unmarked vehicles boxed him in before he hit the exit. Derek Grimby, an agent said, "You're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and violations of federal fair housing law." He didn't fight. He just sagged like a man realizing the ground is gone beneath him. Delilah screamed that she was the victim, that everyone was against her, that none of this was fair. And it would have been almost sad if she hadn't spent 2 years making other families feel small in their own homes. The last thing I saw before they guided her away was her eyes flicking to my driveway like she expected that oil stain to still be my shame. But it wasn't. It was proof of what she'd done, and the proof had finally caught up with her. And standing there in the noise and flashing lights and heavy silence that comes right after a bully loses control, I thought about Maria's sunrise orange paint, and I whispered not to the cameras, not to the crowd, just to myself. I kept my promise. Power doesn't come from a clipboard, it comes from the truth.